All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to our state agency annual report updates and training webinar. Just want to do a sound check real quick and make sure everyone can hear me okay. Just queuing up my screens. Okay. And then from the team, is everyone, we're getting in okay that I can be heard okay?
Sounds good.
Okay. Okay. So we'll get going. This is our first of 3 trainings. All 3 trainings will be the same. I just wanted to give multiple opportunities to be able to participate. So just kind of an overview. We'll go over a web pass if you're new to this report and how to register for a web pass, and so that we can associate you with your report. And then we'll go over each section of the report and the changes in each section, and then pause at each one of those moments and give you an opportunity to answer questions as well. So I'm Andrew Parrish. I'm the lead for the state agency team. And then any questions, if you're not participating in our Zoom webinar or don't have chat or don't have a mic and want to ask a question, you can also send questions to our SARC email address. It's sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov. For the webinar, if you want to ask any questions, please type your question or a summary of your question into the Q&A pane. This might be a new feature. If you don't see this, you might not have the most recent version of Zoom. You want to have version 5.13. And I think a way to check is in the lower right-hand corner of the Zoom icon, kind of showing up on your kind of dashboard down at the bottom of your windows. If you right-click on it, you can check for updates if you don't see that. So something you might want to do now if you're not seeing a Q&A feature. So questions submitted in the chat pane will not be answered live, and we'll direct you to put those questions in the Q&A feature. And the reason for that is we want to be able to record all those questions and responses so that we can provide it to all state agencies, because I'm sure they have similar questions. We'll answer those questions on a first come, first served basis. I think we should have plenty of time to answer all your questions. And to ask a question over the webinar, the team will unmute you, and then you'll have to unmute yourself on your end and then state your name and affiliation, and we will not be using the raise hand function. And then again, you can also email questions to our email address, sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov. And we'll get to that in just a moment. All right. So I guess we'll start here. If I can get rid of this toolbar, give me just a moment. There we go. Okay, so I'll start with the web pass. If you do not have a web pass already, you'll need to create a web pass. And you'll want to come here, and we can post this link in the chat for you as well. So this will be the starting point for registering for web pass, and this is how we'll associate you to your individual agency's report. Okay. And I'll pause just real quick to see if there's any questions on web pass or any logistical questions before I get going on demonstrating the report. Any questions at all? All right, take the silence as a no. There are no questions at the moment. Okay, so this might look a little bit different than what you see on your end. A couple of things I want to point out. I am in kind of a staging environment. You do not quite have access to the 2022 reporting cycle. We're going to release it on March 21st after we do all these webinars. Normally release it March 1st. But because of these changes, we wanted to show the changes first before letting you have access to the report, because it doesn't function differently, but it's just rearranged a little bit differently and the wording's a little bit different. And then I'm also in kind of a staff portal, so some of this left-hand navigation also might not show up on your end, just to show you some differences. But this part here should be how it looks when you log into the SARC database. So you'll just want to click on Start Your 2022 Annual Report, and it'll open up to this summary screen. Just get my notes real quick. All right, so this webinar is for both full and modified reporters. Everything presented may not be relevant to modified reporters, and modified reporters are state agencies that have 200 or less employees. So just a few things to point out on this summary screen. This area here lets you know of your your report progress with these red check marks here indicating if you've completed a section or not. And I'll come back and show you what I mean, because I'll change to green check marks as you complete those sections. Another thing to point out on this screen is that right over here are access to PDF versions of either your current report or your previous report if you needed to use it for reference purposes in filling out your 2022 annual report. If there's anything that you'd like to say in your report that doesn't seem like it belongs in any particular section, you can put that information here. Either report function, maybe something that's not working right, or just any other additional information you'd like to tell us about your agency. The rest of everything here is a summary of other tabs from the report, which we'll go into right now. So your first tab will be the agency report. And so in each of these sections, you can make changes to your agency information. And there's a couple mandatory fields that you have to fill out. So the first mandatory field you're going to have to fill out is right here. And oh, I think I'm actually something's not quite right here. Sorry, give me just a moment. I'm missing my edit button and I'm not sure why. Give me just a moment here, sorry. I apologize for this. When I checked it before, everything was working okay. But normally there's an edit button and I'm not seeing it anymore. Darn it. I apologize for this. You have to give me just a moment here so I can figure out what's going on. And then, yeah, give me just one moment. I'm going to click around for just a moment. I apologize for this, having a little technical difficulties. Do we have any non-report questions at the moment? Sorry, while I try to figure out what's going on with our system here.
We don't have any questions at the moment.
Okay, I really apologize for this delay. I'm not quite sure what's going on.
Andrew, we do have a question. Aspen Cody wants to know, how do you get from WebPass to SARC? Is it a different login? Do you want me to just put that in the chat?
No, that's okay. I guess, can you unmute Aspen and then we can have a discussion about that? So what do you mean by go from the web pass to the SARC login? Because I know you're having some issues with that, and I thought maybe you were able to get into the system, but what are you seeing or not seeing, Aspen?
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks everyone. Yeah, so I can get into my web pass, but that's all that it is. It doesn't have the SARC on there. And so I search for the SARC login. I try my password and it still says I'm locked out there. So I'm wondering if I'm going about it the wrong way. And it's supposed to be like a tab or something on the web pass, or if I just am still locked out for some reason.
Got you. No, there is a way to enter the report, and sorry, I figured out what was going on. So I really apologize for the delay there on why I couldn't get into the report. Aspen, is it okay if after this webinar we help you out with getting access to it?
Of course,
And
yeah,
I'll
that
show
would
you
be
how to do
great.
that. Okay.
Yes, thank you so
perfect.
much.
Okay, I really apologize for that delay. Okay, so once again, just kind of back up and kind of reiterate where we were. So summary screen, we talked about everything here. Next section or first section will be the agency tab, and you'll see the edit button, which is what I was looking for. So in this agency section, you will click edit. And if you need to make any changes to your mailing address or physical address, you can make those here. The one thing that is required is the number of employees at agency headquarters. And so this will, and by headquarters, we kind of mean your main facility. Not all of you may have, I'm sorry, I said that wrong. Your main kind of point of business would be a better way to say that, because we describe your other facilities, which could be warehouses, maintenance yards, satellite offices, which we call facilities. So in this box here that I have highlighted in the red box, you just want to put the number in your main office. So everything I'm inputting here is just for example purposes, but we're just going to say we have 1,000 employees here at CalRecycle at our main office. You will then click save. And you can see that since I've entered that value, agency section is complete. All right, moving on to the contact section. If you need to make any updates to your contacts, this is where one place you can do it. You can also contact us at any time if this changes, and we can help you out with getting these updated if it's not like after you've submitted a report. But one thing you'll notice in this section is first we have this red check mark and that we're not done here, even though there might not be any changes. And you can see over here, contact verified says no. So in order to complete this section, you do still have to go into each one, make the changes as needed. And you have to open that edit screen. If there's no changes, you just click contact verified here and save. So you can see I need to do that 2 more times, but that first one now says yes. So I don't need to make any changes here. So I'll just contact verified all of these. Save. Okay, so now 2 of my sections are complete. You can see that now changed over to the green check mark. All right, facility section. So this would be what I was talking about before of satellite offices or warehouses or maintenance shops or anything else that's not kind of your main point of business. One new feature we do have added here, which it also applies to your headquarters, but that's filled out in a different section. But we added this percentage of employees in the office since most of us are in kind of a teleworking environment, and our previous iterations of the report didn't really have a good way for your agencies to communicate this to us. And the reason this is important to be accurate with this is for the employee number here, you do want to say report the number of employees that are based here, whether they telework or work in the office. So to update these numbers, so we'll just say, for example purposes, that we have 10 people that are kind of stationed at each one of these warehouses and satellite offices that we have. So that's the number of people stationed there. And then as far as the percentage, you know, for example purposes, we require everyone to come in 1 day per week. So the percentage in the office would be 20%. So we'll just do the same thing for these as well. And this may differ for you, but just for example purpose and kind of speed, I'm just going to go with even numbers for us. So when you're done updating those, you do need to click each of these buttons. So update the number of employees. You can see it still has a red check mark. Update percentage of employees. And you can now see that I have completed the facility section. Okay, and then just to kind of come back full circle, and I'll pause and give you an opportunity to ask questions. You can see I now have green check marks on those first 3 sections. And I'll pause and see if there's any questions on that agency section.
We do have one question from Mike. Mike, I'll go ahead and unmute you so that you can ask your question.
Are you there?
Yes.
Yeah, in the state parks, we have permanent employees and then we have seasonal employees. Are the seasonals included on that list?
Yes, you want to include your seasonal employees, but you want to report them as like a full-time employee equivalents. So if I'll just make an easy example. So if you had 2 kind of part-time employees, they together would equal 1 full-time employee.
Okay.
If they were working 50% of the time. Does that answer your question?
Well, they actually work 9 months out of the year.
Okay. Yeah, so your calculation would be a little trickier, but you want to report them as kind of that full-time equivalence. And and you can put that, let's see, where would be the best spot to put that to kind of explain that? It would be, you could put it here to kind of explain that additionally if you wanted to, or even report it out separately. And I'm trying to think of where that spot is. Yeah, I think that would probably be the best spot to put it on this view. You can just kind of explain the number that you have that work 9 months out of the year here, just to kind of give us the full picture.
Thank you.
Any other
Yeah.
agency type
Yeah.
questions?
We have another question from Roxanne Beagle. I'm going to unmute Roxanne.
I was just confirming that the total number of employees should be an FTE number, not a head count.
Full-time
Based-
equivalents, is that
Yeah.
F-time?
Yes.
Yes. Yeah, so just to kind of point out one additional detail, you can kind of see the number at headquarters and then it's summed up in this total employees, everything that I entered in the facilities as well. So the total number there. Is it? I know I kind of went beyond your question, but yes, full-time equivalents. Any other questions?
No more questions at this time.
Okay. So we'll move on to disposal. And this is what I was actually looking for. I forget who answered the parks question.
Actually, Andrew, we do have one more question before we can move on from Joel, if that's okay.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to unmute Joel so that he can ask his question.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
So would it, in my district, so that HQ, would that be considered just my district employees? Don't necessarily have to go to like the department headquarters or anything, right?
Right. So you're with parks as well?
Yes.
Yeah. So I think you have kind of a main office in Sacramento, correct?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So they have their own report where they employ their employees. So yes, just your district. And then I actually gave you the wrong advice. I forget the other parks person that was answering or asked me the question about employees, but this is the section I was looking for. So sorry for the confusion, but here is where we'd like you to explain how you've kind of calculated your total number of employees.
Thank you.
And then I don't know if we can go back to the first parks person. I just want to make sure that that clarification makes sense because I gave you kind of bad guidance on at first there.
That was Mike
Mike.
Dry.
Yeah, Mike, does that make sense? It's actually here in the disposal section where we want you to, where you can talk about, you know, your seasonal employees for 9 months out of the year.
Might confirm that
Per-
he gets it.
Got it. Perfect. Okay. So the disposal section. So this is, you know, the facility section had the same question, but this is where at your kind of headquarters or main operating office where you can report a percentage of employees in the office. So again, it's just a percentage and then you just need to explain how you've calculated that percentage. And I'm going to be using the same example over and over. And we're happy to help you figure that out since it is kind of a new field. It is something new that we're doing with our new teleworking environment. So after this webinar, if you have questions or it still seems confusing, you can email those questions to sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov and we'll help walk you through kind of figuring out your percentage of employees in the office based on your particular situation. So again here, just going to say we require employees to come in 1 day per week. So the percentage of employees in the office would just be 20%, right? 5 days in a week, roughly, 1 day per week, 20%. And then in that explanation, to save us all a little bit of time, I'm going to cheat a little bit. And you just want to explain who is included in this number, how it's calculated, and then how the percentage of employees permanently in the office was determined. So you can kind of see my same example for that percentage is right down here, kind of explaining that in words. Non-employee population, not all of you may have this section. I think Parks does, Caltrans does. So this would be park visitors or rest stop users, public, but this also kind of includes, and we have little tool tips all over here So non-employee examples would be students, visitors, inmates, residents, contractors, patients. And so this is an additional population that significantly contributes to the amount of waste created at an agency or facility. And then you can contact us at SARC, our SARC email box if you wanted to discuss this non-employee population, if you need to report that. All right, total amount disposed. The best here, which I know not a lot of you have, would be to base it off of what your hauler provides you as far as tonnage tickets. You can also do kind of volume to weight conversions, which we can help you with that if that's something you need to do. But the important part is just really to explain how you calculated your number. So here at CalRecycle, since we are also in kind of a leased space along with a bunch of other agencies, is our building, so CalEPA kind of calculates based on the total disposal for the building and goes total building occupants, our total employees employed at that location, since we're in a teleworking environment, and then calculates a pound per person per day value. And then so we just take that value and multiply it by our employees for our offices, and that's how we come up with our number. I'm not actually going to calculate it, but I'm just going to say 5 tons. And this transformation here, so this transformation only applies to a very select few, like probably under 5 of you. And what transformation is incineration, pyrolysis, distillation, or biological conversion of waste to energy at one of 2 facilities in the state. There's one in Stanislaus County and there's one down in Long Beach. So if you're not anywhere near those, you're most likely putting a 0 in this box. So this is the burning of trash for energy. This is not recycling of cans and turning them into new cans. So most of you will probably be saying 0 here, but for those of you that are located next to one of those facilities, you may have something to report here. And again, those tooltips here will give a little additional information for you if you're not sure of what to report here. So we have no transformation at our facility, so 0. The annual report section calculates your number of employees and your total amount disposed to come up with your annual disposal. This target value was calculated back in like 2006, 2007, based on kind of initial agency numbers and disposal at that time. All right, a couple little changes here. We simplified these last 2 questions and consolidated the mattresses reporting down to one section instead of it being in multiple places throughout your report. So here, what we use these boxes for is really to better understand what may be going on at your agencies or things that are difficult for you to get rid of so that we can provide better assistance and help you find alternatives to disposal if there are any. So you just want to put that information here so that we can better assist you. And then you can also explain those difficulties. So you can almost put a bulleted list here if you wanted to. You know, food service packaging, probably be a common one. Styrofoam, you know, broken office furniture maybe, etc. And then you can say why down here. It's hard to find an avenue to reuse, recycle, or compost those items. And this just allows us to provide better assistance to you. All right, so a new kind of addition to this report is this entire mattress section. So this used to be sprinkled throughout the report. We just put it all in one spot. So you can see over here on the right, it does have the red asterisks. So entries are required here. If this does not apply to you, then you would just put 0s in all these sections. And then this is just an additional box if you wanted to talk about your mattress disposal, recycling, reuse, or any that are exchanged. Do not have to put anything down in this box, but entries are required here. Okay, so I'll save that, and you can see I've now completed the disposal section. I'll pause again to see if there's any questions on the disposal section.
Andrew, we have 2 questions regarding non-employee population. The first one was from Aspen. Aspen, did I answer your question, or do you want to ask Andrew your question?
Sure, thanks. Just confirming that we would just reach out to John Duke if we're at a university, and obviously students contribute to our waste.
No, so John Duke is CalRecycle's representative. And on it, actually, I think whoever it says here will probably be wrong. This is something we just changed recently. Hopefully it gets updated prior to release of the report, but you'll just want to reach out to SARC at calrecycle.ca.gov. So SARC at calrecycle.ca.gov, and we'll help you through that process.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, and then we have one more question related to non-employee population from Pete Vasquez. Pete, would you like to ask Andrew your question? Pete's question is, in regards to non-employee population, we will be reporting all visitors that come to visit incarcerated inmates, ?
So if they contribute to your disposal in a significant amount. So your inmates for sure, you're going to include in that non-employee population, but probably not most likely your the visitors of those inmates, unless they're contributing significantly to your disposal. That answer your question?
Yes, he says it did answer his question.
Okay, perfect. Any other questions on this section?
It's not about non-employees, but we did have a comment that came in regarding teleworking. And the comment was made by Hugo. So Hugo, I will go ahead and unmute you. That way you can ask your question.
Alrighty. Well, it seems like he sort of explained it a little bit at the on the previous part, but one of the things is, I work for CSU Stanislaus. It's a university, and we have approximately, say, 1,300 employees here. So the part that is going to be difficult for me is to determine what percentage of those employees were telecommuting during that time. I guess I'm going to have to do some research here at the university, but it's going to be pretty difficult. Because to be exact and to be able to explain how that percentage came about.
Yeah, we're not looking, it doesn't need to be a 23% or 37%. You don't need to get it exact. What the reason we added this is because your disposal is based off of this number and this number here, which if you're telling us you have 1,000 employees and dispose of 1 ton of trash, we would question why that was so, because it just seems like a very low amount of disposal for that amount of people. Whereas if you give us kind of that additional information of these 1,000 people, only 20%, so now we're down to 200, only 1 ton of disposal, it gives us that little additional piece of information that makes more sense of why your disposal might be so low.
Okay, so as long as it's explained on that line, that would be okay. And then one of the things, for example, one of the reasons, even though the university was not at staff completely, a lot of people were working from home. Even during that time, I worked for facilities management, so we're the ones that collect all the refuse and everything, recycling here in the university. But even during that time, by not having students on campus for a few months, it seems like our tonnage increased because we were getting rid of a lot of furniture that we were not able to recycle. So it went into the landfill by our hauler. So, as long as that explained, that will suffice.
Yeah, that's kind of why we put these two boxes here.
Okay.
So you can kind of further explain how you went about calculating your percentage of employees in the office in this employees box up here. And then for your disposal, it makes complete sense of why your disposal would go up if you're doing some remodels or cleaning out, living spaces. But just, yeah, use that box to kind of explain why your tonnage might be so high.
All right. Now I just wanted to make sure, because I knew that, the percentage was not going to be accurate. I can do my best and try and figure out, I know that some departments were working from home, some others were not. Like us in facilities management, we worked, most of the time we were here. Like I said, 1,300 employees and so many departments on campus, it'd be pretty difficult for me to figure that out. But I'll do my best to get a percentage in there.
Yeah, I think in your particular case, yes, you do have a little bit more work to figure that out. But if you broke it down in kind of this explanation box of, our facilities employees that consisted of 100 employees were in the office full time, but then our faculty staff was only in the office 20% of the time. If you wanted to break it down and then just kind of, take your 100%, your 20% and average it and put that number here. But as long as you're explaining how you got about it and it makes sense, that's what we're looking for.
Okay. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions on disposal?
No more questions.
Okay. And then I'm going to see if I can do it real quick. I just really want to kind of emphasize that this is a required section. If you do not put anything here, you'll most likely get an error that you need to finish something here. So yeah, you can kind of see with me deleting those answers, right? You got the red check mark. So this is a new change. That's why I want to just say this one more time. And it's okay to put zeros down in this section, but you do need to provide some sort of response down in this section. Okay. All right, moving on to programs. So the programs consists of these 6 sections over here. And you can see over on the right, you can tell we haven't completed these sections quite yet. And then overall, we haven't done this entire tab. So to complete this section, we do have to go to into each one. You click edit at the top. And then you check all that apply across in this recycling section, all that apply for both your headquarters as well as any facilities you may have. And we did change these around and added a few more options. Used to say beverage containers here, and we broke that apart into aluminum cans and like plastics 1s and 2s. And then I think the glass was here, but we kind of broke those beverage containers apart because what it was referring to was like your California cash redemption value beverage containers. And it just made more sense to get a little bit more specific. And in this section, you want to check all that may apply of if you're able to recycle these. So you have a recycling program in place that does divert these materials. Because I know a lot of you, since you're teleworking, you may not be generating these materials, but if you are in the office and have a way to recycle them, you'll want to give yourself that credit and check these boxes. So just check all that apply. The ones that I've checked are, very common ones, and then anything else you'll want to check as well. And you'll notice for those of you that do report recycling, I think right around here, we used to have the mattresses recycling, so we've removed that from all of these sections as well. And then we do provide an additional detail box down here if you want to provide any additional explanation on what you're recycling and how you go about recycling it. So you save. And you can now see the, this changed from red to the number of activities I selected. I'm going to jump over organics recycling because that's going to be a little bit longer of a discussion, and it's also going to relate to this facility organics as well. So I'm going to skip that one for now and go on to these other more straightforward sections. So waste prevention reuse, same idea. Edit, select all that apply, as far as what you do for waste prevention or reuse. So whether that be, you know, email versus paper memos, double-sided copies, hand dryers, whatever it may be, you know, not printing things, reuse your pallets if you're in kind of a warehouse setting. So just select all that apply. And then again here, I'm kind of cheating a little bit, but you can provide an additional description of your waste prevention or reuse programs down in that box below. Save. And then you can see that one changed to the activity selected. All right, material exchange, edit. Anything you may apply, select all those. And I'm going to cheat again, provide that explanation on what we do for material exchange and put that in there. And save. All right, green procurement. So this section for the recycling coordinators out there, you may not know about this as far as what your agency does, or maybe you do. But this section closes the loop. So you may need to check in with your procurement kind of division or unit to see if some of these things apply. We did simplify this a little bit and removed an option that's normally here. I'm not going to really talk about it, but it talked about fiscal. So we just removed that because it just didn't really make sense to have it here anymore. So that's something that changed. And so if you have these procurement policies in place, you'll want to check those boxes. And then we assume and or hope that if you have these policies in place, that you use those policies to train staff on those policies, and then also use the language in those policies for any contracts for procuring goods. So you just want to select all that apply there. And then you can provide an explanation in the box down here. Which, sorry, I'm trying to find my little cheater notes. Here they are. And put that explanation in the box. Save. Training education, last section before we go to organics. So here we changed the top 4 to hopefully make them more straightforward as far as what's required for state agencies. So what we mean is per AB 2812, which if you need more information on 2812, you can click on this link down here. But what 2812 did implement was that you are required to have these top 4 at a minimum. So have that required dedicated recycling staff, have the required signage on recycle bins and compost bins, your training employees as required, and you have the adequate number and condition of recycling receptacles as well. And so this is per AB 2812, your state agencies are required to have these top 4. You also want to select anything else that does apply to you as well, as far as training and education programs. And this one, we have kind of a lengthy explanation, but then we kind of break that down on a per requirement. So the 1, 2, 3, 4 at the top here, our recycling coordinator goes into detail about how we do each one of those programs. Okay, save that information there. I'm going to pause for a minute, see if there's any questions before we go to organics on any of these sections. Yep.
We do have a question in the chat regarding toner and copier cartridges for recycling. If a courier picks those up, do they leave that box unchecked?
If the courier is taking them and recycling them, or I guess are they reusing them, I guess would be depending on where you want to check that box. But if they're taking them and you can verify that they're taking them for recycling or reuse, you'll want to check the box. Does that answer your
Alex,
question?
Would you like to ask your, oh, do you got it? Okay, so. Okay,
Any-
I think you answered his question. Thank you.
Okay, any other questions?
None that I see.
All right, so this last section, this is probably where we made the most changes to the report outside of that percentage of employees that we allowed added as well. So organics recycling here in the program section, you're only reporting on your main place of business. So we'll enter that now. So again, the one we're in right now is program. So this is not for your satellite offices. For your satellite offices and warehouses and anything else that you've classified as a facility, you're going to report on the organics of that separately in the facility organics section. And I'll show you that in just a moment here. So to kind of come back for us at our programs, at our headquarters, and it does kind of give you the cue here of which facility it's talking about. So this is our 1001 I Street, where there's the 1,000 employees. We need to answer some questions about organics recycling. So you can see right now there's only one question. Some of the changes we made here is we simplified, hopefully clarified what we're talking about here. So the first question, what materials do employees and non-employees generate at this location? So for us, even though it might not be very much because we're working we're working remote for the most part, but for the people that are here, there's technically food scraps and food soil paper generated here. We're not talking about quantity quite yet. So that just means like me, if I'm the only person in the office and I need an apple, I'm generating organic waste because of that apple core or banana peel. And then using a paper towel to wipe my mouth would be the food soil paper, or to heat something up in the microwave. So that's why I check these. Another change we made here, and to clarify, is we added these tooltips to green waste and landscape and pruning waste. And so for these, this applies to those of you more so in leased spaces. So you only want to select green waste and landscape and pruning waste if your agency has direct control over management of this material or the contract with the landscaper. So for example, if you're in a lease space and property management has direct control over management of that material, you would not check these boxes as materials that you generate here. I'm going to pause right there because I know this section can be a little bit confusing, to see if there's any questions on just this very first question.
I don't see any questions yet.
Andrew, I
Yep.
see a hand raised. Monty, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep.
So does this landscape and pruning waste and green waste, do we count that if we handle it on site ourselves? And we deal with it, we chip it, we burn it, anyway.
Yes, to answer your question, and then we'll get into how that material is managed in the question 4 is where you'd provide that information, which we'll get to in just a minute. But yes, to answer your question, you'd select green waste and landscape and pruning waste is generated at that location.
Thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Yep.
There's another question from Alex. Alex, can I unmute you and so everybody can hear your question in case they have a similar? Okay, you're unmuted, Alex. Alex is asking if DGS has control over green waste and landscape because it's leased, do they leave those boxes unchecked?
Correct. If you're in a lease space from DGS and DGS manages that material, you do not select green waste and landscape and pruning waste.
Okay. And then Alex, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A. His microphone is not working.
Any other questions on this very first question? We're going to get into what you say about how these materials are managed in just a moment, but I just want to make sure that what we're talking about as far as generation makes sense before we move on. Okay, I'll take the silence as a yes. Okay, and then obviously if you're generating, wood waste, you'd want to select that box as well, or you can select other and provide that additional information. I think there's very few situations where you're going to select no organic material at this agency. You would not select this if you have a waiver in place, for example. I'll show you where you report having a waiver in just a moment. All right, so question 2 used to have a lot of options and a lot of text on this question, and we simplified it hopefully to make more sense and be a little bit more straightforward. So question 2, select the amount of solid waste. So that means trash, recycling, and organics generated collectively. And we just simplified it down to these 2 options. So either 2 or more cubic yards of solid waste, meaning all of that stuff put together, trash, recycling, and organics. We're not talking about just organics anymore, or less than that. And so you just select the one that applies. And as a rough frame of reference, a 2 cubic yard dumpster is approximately 4 feet by 4 feet by 6 feet large. And so if all of your services combined together are more than that, you'd select 2 or more. The example of less than 2 cubic yards would be if you just kind of had those 96-gallon roll-off carts for those materials for your external use, you'd be less than 2 cubic yards. Or potentially if you had a significant teleworking population, even though you had a high employee count, you might be less than 2 cubic yards, which is why that percentage of employees part is so important for us. Because if you had 1,000 employees, but then said less than 2 cubic yards here, we would question if that was accurate or not. But with that kind of added detail, which it doesn't show up on the headquarters, but it will in facilities, of 0% are in the office, your less than 2 cubic yards makes a lot more sense, even though your employee count is high. I'm going to stay here for now. All right, so question 3, we simplified as well. So this is if you operate food service facilities, and this is prior to disposal if you have anything that applies. So one example where this most likely applies would be kind of in the prisons, right? They have food portion right sizing, meaning that they give 1 scoop of mashed potatoes as opposed to 2, so to help minimize that food waste of what's thrown away, kind of on that initial, and maybe have them come up for more if they want more food. And then an edible food recovery program. If you have one, you can also check that box. We added this self-haul. And so if you check the self-haul, you want to provide the name of the food recovery service and or food recovery organization that the food is self-hauled to in the box that showed up. If you do not operate food service at your facility, it is totally okay to just say there's no food service at this location. You're not doing anything wrong by saying you have no food service at this location. All right, and then Monty, to get back to your question, number 4 here is where you're going to talk about, based on what we said up here in number 1, what happens to that material. So in your particular example, and I'm just going to select them all so you can kind of see what it looks like here, depending on what you select. So you can see it breaks it up into different categories. And so for each one, the responses are the same. So for you, Monty, you would just say green waste, landscape managed on site. For us, we're going to say hauler pickup. And we'll just say Republic Services is our hauler that picks that up. Same for our food scraps. And just for example purposes, we're just going to say they also collect this for us because we put all of these materials in the same bin and they come up and pick all of that up for us. You'll also see we added this option. So we did do a waiver webinar back in January. So if you have multiple sites you need to submit a waiver for, whether it be de minimis or you're in a rural or low population jurisdiction, you can go back and review that waiver webinar and that will give you information on how to submit that. We have quite a few that are in process still, and so we should be getting back to you soon on whether we approve those waivers or not. So prior to submitting your report, if you have received that confirmation from us that we've approved your waiver for either your headquarters and or your facilities, you can just select this option here. And it could apply to all the materials, could apply to just one depending. But I just want to really emphasize, number one is asking you what's generated. So whether it's very little or a lot of material, if it's generated, you want to select that option. And then down here in 4 is where you would talk about how that material is managed, or whether you have a waiver and are not required to manage that material or divert that material from disposal. So I'll pause again, see if there's any more questions.
We do have a couple questions regarding the main headquarters, and I just want to make sure that Alex's questions get answered. His microphone doesn't work. He wants to know for the organics recycling portion, are they to report for the department's main headquarters? Just the reporting for the main headquarters. Does that make sense?
So for your agency, you report on all organics at all locations. I'm going to save this real fast and show you where you report what. So I'm going to go back for a moment. We can always come back here. So in programs, organics recycling, you report on your headquarters. For any satellite offices or warehouses or campgrounds or whatever else you may have that is not your headquarters, you're going to report individually, which is where I was going to next, each facility that you've reported back on the agency tab. So we're going to repeat those same questions and I'll jump into it right now. So now you can kind of see we're now talking about each facility. And we need to come in here and answer those exact same questions. There's no difference between the organics recycling up here in programs and those in facility organics, but for organics specifically, you have to report on each location and what's generated and how it's managed. Does that answer your question?
I think so. Yeah, he says yes. Okay, and then one other question, does the organics waiver need to be completed? Oh, I think it's, yeah, I think you just answered both of his questions.
Okay. Yeah, so you can see here, you know, we've added where you've reported that percentage in the office. If you had, you know, 100 here and you're saying 20%, it now makes a lot more sense to us if you're saying, you know, less than 2 cubic yards if this was 100 up here. So it's the same questions here. So whatever you select on a per site location, you'll need a waiver for each location, which again, our waiver webinar talks about how to submit waivers for all locations if it's the same reason for the request, including de minimis, which means not very much material being generated, even though some is generated there. We can provide the link to that webinar as well, of where you can find that on our website. And or you can email us at sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov if you need further help with submitting for waivers, if it may apply to you. So for here, you do need to run through each facility. You can kind of see it has the same structure over here on the left telling you if you've done it for the facility or not. So we did that first one. So we're complete and have 4 more to do. So for time's sake, edit this, right? So like, here's a good example, right? So this is not really an appropriate use of this because the organic material is generated here. Could be very little. So we'd still want to say the food scraps and soil paper are generated here. And then down here in how it's handled is where you could provide that further explanation on those specifics. But you want to, in number 1, talk about what's generated, and then number 4, talk about how that material is managed. So just so I can get to kind of the next step of the report and show you kind of the submittal process, I need to run through this real quick and do this for each site. So that one, oops. And so for each one of these, you can kind of see that it doesn't give me credit for completing it, even though I may not have changes until I hit edit and save at a minimum, but most likely going to have to put an option down here in number 4 as far as how that material is managed. Oops. Okay, so now that I've run through the entire report, you can come back to that summary page. Oh, and it's, see, I missed a few things. So enter program information, did not quite complete that. I'm not sure why it's giving me that error. Do we have any other questions when I kind of run through and try to find why this is not allowing me to keep going?
I don't see any questions at this time.
Okay, thank you. There it goes. Something I didn't do in there. Okay, so now you can see we've now completed all the sections of the report, and our last step would be to submit the annual report, which you do right here with this button. I'm not going to do it because I need to use this report for a few more webinars, but you just want to make sure before you press this button that everything is accurate in these sections above, because as soon as you submit, you won't be able to go back in and change anything. It'll kind of lock you out from editing. If it's prior to May 1st and you accidentally click this button, you can contact us and we can unsubmit that report. So if you do accidentally click this and you needed to update something prior to that May 1st reporting deadline, we can unsubmit it for you. So you can make some edits there. All right, so now that we've run through the whole thing, you submit this, and then you'll get an email confirming submittal. And then you'd be done with your report. If you want to get to any old reports, you can come up here in that reports tab and pick a previous year. If you didn't want just the previous, because the previous one is also located here, over here on the right on the summary screen. So now we've run through the entire thing. Is there any particular section anyone would like me to go back to and talk about some more. We have plenty of time if there's anything anyone would like me to revisit.
I don't see anything coming into the Q&A pool or the chat.
Are there
but I
any questions?
guess
Any questions in our SARC inbox?
None at this time.
All right, well, we'll hang out for a few more minutes just to make sure you can, if you're typing away, trying to get your question in there, we'll wait just a few more minutes, but we probably won't run all the way until noon if there's no further questions. I guess just to, while we're waiting, we'll come back to
we we do have a hand raised from Monty. Monty, I'll
Okay.
go ahead and unmute you.
Yeah, I don't have that little chat box Q&A. I don't have access to any of the chat for that matter. So anyway, my question is, will this recording be available to us?
Yeah,
So we
great
can
question.
Refer back to it at any time, and where can we find it?
Great question. It's just where I was going. So I'm going to start with, we are going to hold 2 more of these webinars. They will be the same as we did today. You know, new questions might get asked, and so we'll have those as part of the recordings as well. But March 16th, 10 to 12, and then March 20th, 1 to 3. And then we'll release the report March 21st. So just to kind of reiterate that. And then the recordings we're going to post on our state agency webpage. So if you go there right now, it has our old recordings from our old report. So we're going to replace those with these new recordings. And so they'll all be posted there. We'll try to get them up as quickly as possible. And then when they're all uploaded, or as they're uploaded, we'll be sure to send out messaging when they're available.
We had a question come into the Q&A poll from Joel. Joel, I'll go ahead and unmute you.
Hi, this is my first time logging into CalRecycle. I created an account and I'm having trouble finding that page where you were filling in all those boxes and everything. Can you walk me through that?
Yeah, we'll start with, have you registered for a web pass?
Yes, I went to the CalRecycle and it said a new account, created an account. And then I verified all that information.
So here, you went here and created an account, this one here?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And then a lot of times a second email comes through to confirm account creation. Did you get that and complete that
Yes.
as well? Okay. So I think the next step is we probably need to associate you with your agency.
Okay.
So if you could just shoot us a quick email to sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov, we'll go ahead and take care of that on our end, and you should be able to get into your report then.
Perfect. Thank you very much.
Yep. And so while we're here, so this is the Waste Management State Agency page where I said the recordings would be posted, and they'll be like right here. So these are our old ones. So these, at the moment, most of it's still relevant, but the new changes are not in these videos, but we'll replace these to reduce that confusion. And this is where the new recordings will be found. Any other questions?
None that I see.
All right, we'll give it a couple more minutes, giving plenty of time. But if not, we're just going to go ahead and sign off for the day, and then we'll see you again if you want to attend. If you want to hear going over a section again, or if anything else comes to mind and you want to ask that question live, you can attend one of these other webinars and ask your question as well. And then we sent this all 3 out on that same listserv message. So all of those Zoom links are on that same listserv message that we sent out. And we can send it out again too if anyone didn't get that. All right, I'm gonna give it until 11:15. If I don't get anything else, we're gonna sign off for the day. And so I guess just to reiterate for those of you that have been around, we recently reorganized and split into our JACE enforcement branch and then our local assistance market development branch, our assistance branch. And so for state agency help, we shifted to a centralized structure because we just have less team members and we're trying out more of a focused approach with state agency support. So you'll want to email the email address on the screen, sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov, for any technical assistance you may need on filling out your report or any other questions you may have, or trying to manage a difficult material. So all of that goes into the central location, and then an individual team member will reach back out to assist you. All right, we'll just give it a couple more minutes just to make sure there's no questions. All right, we'll check in. Are there any emails at all? Asking any questions, Michelle?
I haven't seen any additional questions come in.
Okay, perfect. All right, I'll just check in one more time with the Q&A or the chat. Do we have any unanswered questions in there?
Nope, we're all good here.
All right, well, if anything comes to mind after this, you can attend one of our other 2 webinars we'll have on March 16th or March 20th, and then we will post these recordings as soon as we can process them for ADA compliance on the website listed on the screen. And any other questions you may have, you can always email us at sarc@calrecycle.ca.gov. And with that, we're going to sign off for the day. Hope you all have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk to you soon. Thank you so much.